Good morning, colleagues, and welcome everyone. And thanks for joining in the session. We will be just looking at how we could potentially integrate digital literacies into the curriculum to enhance student digital learning experience. And so feel free to grab the mic and if you'd like to ask a question, or you could, because now when I share, it might be challenging for me to see the hands that are raised. But feel free to just interject anytime. So the outline, we will be looking at the conceptualization of digital literacy as a social practice and what this means for learning and assessment activities and their design. And then I will share a bit about factors that influence students' digital literacy practices, which is some stuff from research that I conducted with first-year students, and then how students acquire these digital practices and skills. And once they've got the learning and assessment activity that is in place, and then we'll look at a systems approach to designing these learning activities. And then we'll also have an opportunity for people to work on their own activities, and that would be followed by a discussion. So looking at the conceptualization of digital literacy, so this is just to make it clear that we are looking at digital literacy as a social practice rather than a skill. So with this perspective, we understand that the skill is embedded within a practice. So the students will be engaging in a practice, and of course, they will be drawing on skills. And so that's embedded within the practice. And then also, again, this is based on the notion that digital literacy involves openness in social practices that are grounded in the digital domain. So you would be having these practices that students have to engage in within your course, and then they will be drawing on their digital skills in order to engage in those practices. And so the practice itself, as we know, it would always be related to the social context, the cultural context, economic and political changes, and so it will be flexible, and so it is not fixed, and hence students have to keep on also developing their digital literacy skills in order to be able to engage in these practices. So digital literacy is not a condition. We always have got to keep up with this. So for instance, even if students have been using some technology in high school or at home, but of course they've got to now acquire the digital literacies required for their courses. And looking at this social practice approach, then also looking at this within the discipline. So as you are developing students' digital literacies within the courses, and so your course, which is also within a particular discipline. And so this social practice approach is also drawing from the academic literacies, which also use the social practice approach. So which means the discipline is there as framing, I would say, as a frame for all the digital literacies that will be happening. So these disciplines are reservoirs of, and there are ways of knowing which in dynamic combinations with other structural phenomena can condition behavioral practices, sets of discourses, ways of thinking and procedures, emotional responses and motivations. And so looking at this practice approach, then there is this framework from the NG. And so I've sort of adapted this framework to look at the practices. And so also just to clarify that the practices of digital literacy as we often look at that as a skill, but just to also note that there are also other dimensions. So the technical skill, which we'll be placing in the technical dimension, and then we've got the cognitive dimension, which is looking at information literacy, students' evaluation of information, and even just identifying when they're given a task, just identifying what information is needed for me to be able to complete this task. That's a cognitive skill on its own. And then also understanding and applying the copyright and Creative Commons licensing associated with content use and reuse. So when they come across resources, when they're working on their assignments, they should be able to understand the copyright as well as Creative Commons licensing and how this works, how they've got to be attributing the resources that they find. And then also synthesizing and using information, which is would be pulling together all the stuff that you have for the assignment and so on. And then also the social, emotional dimension, which is really looking at someone and how they safeguard themselves online and how they observe the netiquette and how they engage with other people. And this very last point, which was also from my research, which was it's also just important for people to acknowledge other people's input. So if students are working on a shared task, if they're collaborating, it's really important, even if you're not going to use someone else's contribution, but just to acknowledge their input. And so you're always working in a friendly manner. And so when looking at digital literacy, this is now looking at it as a family of practices or literacies, which may include all different sorts of skills, of practices. And also just to note that with this social practice approach, the skills that students develop or the practices. We're not looking at practices as in a progressive way, but we are also aware that students may be more capable in other dimensions than the other. So they may be more capable in the technical dimension, but they may still need your support in the cognitive dimension on how they can be making use of information in order to prepare their tasks. They may be needing more assistance, maybe also just to think about how they manage their sorry, their online profiles and how they engage online. And so this is just a way of thinking of digital literacy. And the social and technical, you see, there are also just different ways in which students could be engaging. They could be sharing their activities, their materials and discussions using maybe WhatsApp, which is really happening in our context. And they could be tweeting, they could be joining in and establishing some professional learning networks on LinkedIn online and following some really good models or even just experts in their fields. And so this is just all part of digital literacy. So with the factors influencing digital literacies or digital literacy practices, and there are so many factors that could be influencing this, but you will notice that the learning and assessment activity, which is the LAA, the learning and assessment activity, you will see that it's really appearing in all these different dimensions. So what students are doing in their technical dimension, they may be engaging or using a particular technology or application software because they've got to make use of it in their course, or that's a requirement of their course. The cognitive, they may also be doing a lot of evaluating information and so on. So depending on the nature of the activity, if they're given an assignment, of course, they've got to go out and look for online resources. They've got to evaluate these resources. They've got to simulate this content. And so they definitely need to be engaging in the cognitive dimension because of the requirement of the activity. And they've got to be referencing and all that stuff. And also with the social, emotional, and the cognitive dimension. So this is in the instance where students have got to be engaging collaboratively on a shared task. And so, of course, they are doing that because it's a requirement of the activity. And so they are collaborating. And so these are just different examples that we could give. And you will notice that there is also some lack of prior experience. So sometimes students are not using a particular tool, they're not engaging in a particular social practice because they are not, they don't have prior experience to that. And with these students, as they were first year students in this research, and I was also looking at whether they had enrolled for any computing related subject at high school. And so we could see that that was also influencing some of the practices that students were engaging in. So some of them had used some collaboration tools at high school, and so it was much easier for them to engage. And yet with others, they hadn't used it anywhere. And so the historicity of the practice. So for instance, some students, it was their first time even working on an essay. Others were just used to maybe just discussions in class, but they have never been given the opportunity to sit down and construct an essay. And so it was very difficult for them to work on their essays, and they had to learn quite a lot. So these are just examples. You see with the technical, we also have got the students who stay on campus or off campus. There were also a number of practices that were different. So for instance, those living off campus who didn't have any internet connectivity when they're away from campus. So they knew that they had to download all their stuff while they're on campus so that they could work with that later on. And so there are so many factors that influence, as well as the discipline, of course, as we know that we say these practices are influenced by the discipline. So just also to share how students really acquire digital literacies, literacy practices and skills when they have been given that opportunity by means of the learning and assessment activity. So you find that there is no need for overt instruction that is isolated from the context of practice. So where you just take them to the lab and just teach them overtly on the teach them the skill. So once that is integrated in the form of a task, you find that students can do their self-teaching. So for instance, students, one student shared that they were just searching on Google how to do something. So they were given an activity, they had to draw a business model. And so they went for the word smart art. And so with this student not knowing how to make use of it, then the student just went into Google, searched how to add more nodes into that smart art. And so they acquired the skill. And students also do learn from their peers. So for instance, so one student was sharing that they had Googled stuff, but also another student asked a friend, and the friend started showing them what to do and how to do it. And so this student was now excited that she was able to make use of email because she had learned that from the peers. Also, students shared as well that they are also getting some scaffolding from their senior students. So for instance, the tech buddies and digital literacy tutors, and some would even engage with their course tutors. So for instance, one student shared that I can also add that I didn't know about Google Documents, but this was through the assistance of the tutor. So because we asked him what a Google document was, so he said that one of us must go to Google, to Gmail, and then showed us the steps on how to create a Google document. And so the course tutors were able to assist in this instance, but also at the beginning of the year, I think some of you may be aware that we do support faculties as they recruit tech buddies or digital literacy tutors, or some people make use of orientation leaders. And so we do train those students, senior students, and then in turn, they help the first year students. And so another student also approached a student who, a senior student who was in the same program. And so, for instance, this student who is in this same program was now able to assist the student with the cognitive dimension, some practices in the cognitive dimension. So this student used to share the assignment with the senior student, and the senior student would comment, give some feedback to the student, and so in preparation, and then some formative feedback, and then the student would then work on that and submit. And so she was just giving an example here. I didn't know how to reference. She would just put in dots and all that stuff. And so the senior student who she's associating this with marking. As the senior student who's marking on the other side highlights the things and says reference using Harvard, which is the requirement in that particular course. And so these are different ways in which students acquire the practices and skills. And so we really don't need to have these separate classes to say we are now teaching the skill. But as long as we've got this built into our courses, then students can approach their peers, they can approach their senior students, and so or they can even go into Google, go into YouTube, and they sort of seek how to make use of these skills. And so just giving an example now of how we can think about a systematic way of thinking about our learning activities and how we could integrate them. So this is just for us to see the different elements. So I've used here the activity theory, which is just as a lens to just map this. And so thinking about who the subjects of this learning activity are. So here in this instance, the subjects is the group of students. So with this course, which is a commerce course, the main outcomes were that the students by the end of the day were supposed to be able to understand the e-business concepts. And they also then, in this instance, had to consolidate an e-business concept document. And at the same time, they were also going to develop their digital literacy skills. And so by the time the lecturer was developing the activity, these were the learning outcomes that had to be in place. So thinking about, okay, this is now at the end, the students have to understand the e-business concepts. And so not just going to teach them there, but I will give a bit of basic knowledge or basic information, and then students have got to also build that in a collaborative task. And so and so now what the students were required to do, they had to together collaborate on an e-business concept document. So they had to produce that, which was the main activity that they were working on. And these would be the outcomes. And to do that, these students were then having a number of roles that they had to work with. So there is the course roles and norms. So they understand, okay, this is our course, it's in this particular discipline. And so there are a number of roles that we've got to be working with, of course, in our course and norms. And then for this particular activity, there are also the mark allocation, thinking about the roles of the activity as well, because we'll give the students instructions on what to do. And then, of course, working with different resources. They're also thinking about uh, the copyright, and also think about the intellectual property licenses. And then, of course, because in this instance, they've got to be working in a group, they are also having their own social rules and collaboration rules. And so they've got a lot of rules to sort of guide the way they engage. And so the lecturer is there, the students are there, the tutors are there to also help the students. And so there's also quite a lot of division of labor that's taking place there. The lecturer is providing the resources. We also have got tutors who are providing formative feedback. So they had to get access to the students' Google documents so that they could be able to access their assignments and provide feedback. And then also the students also have got to be assigning themselves their own roles. So as they are working collaboratively, but of course they will be dividing some tasks. Okay, you go and look for this, and then you come back and share with the group. You go and work on this, and so on. So they've got also to be assigning roles among themselves. And then in doing this, they are using a variety of tools, which you are also thinking about. Immediately you say they must go and work on a Google document collaboratively. So you've thought about the tool, and of course it must be meeting the requirements of the activity. And so they are using a lot of tools there, computers, the internet, online resources that they're finding, and then they are engaging in the collaborative document. And another example from humanities, where students have got to be working as an individual on the essay. So they are constructing an essay. And so at the end of the day, they must have completed the essay, and also this will produce digitally literate humanities students. And here, so the student is working individually, they are constructing their essays, and there are also as well a number of roles. So we know also our course rules and cultures and norms. And then there's also the task rules. So also looking at intellectual property licenses and making sure that students don't plagiarize. So they also have got to be looking at so much. And then they've got, of course, the Harvard referencing style. So there are a number of rules that they've got to be abiding to. And then here we've got the lecturers and students. And as well here, the lecturers have also given an opportunity to provide formative feedback. Some students did use it, some didn't. And so students work on their essays. And of course, in this instance, there are also quite a lot of tools that students are making use of. So they are using computers or tablets, and they've got course readers, internet, online resources, and word processor, because they are just preparing their essay in Word. Okay, no comments so far. So now thinking about our own activities. So when designing your learning activity, you are thinking about your learners, you are thinking about how they are going to be interacting with other learners, and what particular resources they are going to be using as well. And in order to reach that particular outcome. And so thinking about the learning outcome, so what do you want them to achieve at the end of the day? Is it new knowledge? Is it new skills and abilities? And are they creating something? So you could be thinking about, for instance, Bloom's taxonomy, which has got a number of verbs that can help you to build your activities. and your learning outcomes as well. So what is it that you want your students to live with at the end of the day? Is it new knowledge? Is it skills? Is it creating an artifact or creating an essay in this instance that I've given? And so you're thinking about the learners themselves, what skills they are bringing in, what knowledge, what abilities they are bringing into the course already, and what you need to develop, help them develop. And then you're also thinking about how they will be interacting with others. You're also thinking about the learning environment and how you would help students learn, and what is available there in terms of tools, artifacts, and you're also thinking about the learning environment itself and creating that conducive learning environment. And also, when designing your learning activity, you need to give clear guidelines as well. And so, first of all, your activity will have a title, and you will also be really clear about what learning outcomes you are trying to help students achieve through that activity. So your learning activity should be really congruent to your learning outcomes and also your pedagogical strategies. So if you want your students to be, want to develop collaborative skills, and so you'll be looking for an activity that will be helping students to collaborate. And so you also must be clear about the purpose and the intention of the activity, and the pedagogical strategy also has to be clear. And then with the task, you must also make clear what students are expected to do, and are they going to be working as individuals or pairs, and how much time will the activity take, and when should they complete that, and so on. So this is just clear instructions that you give to the students. And then, of course, it's really crucial that you identify the resources that students may need, and also the support that they may need. And so the tools that students may require to complete the activity. So in most cases, you find that you will be advising students on the tool to use. And so you must have looked at the affordances of the tool. Are they going to be really helping students to do that activity well? And so you've got to be clear about the affordances of the tool. And so, of course, note that there should be congruency between the learning outcomes, the pedagogical strategy, and the tools that are adopted. So we will go into breakout rooms, and I see we are 23. So let's create, Max, let's create 6 breakout rooms.
Okay, cool. How many breakout rooms would you like?
6.
6.
Yes, so we'll have 6 breakout rooms. And so I would like people just to take some time. So I'll give you I'll give you 20 minutes to work on this. So you will just rethink your course, and just take 1 or 2 learning outcomes, and you think of, so the one that I really want us to think about is teaching and learning. So just thinking about your learning outcomes or goals, what you want students to achieve at the end of the day, and you just outline the teaching and learning activity that you would give the students, and also thinking about the resources that students may need here. So you might be providing them with some resources, some screenshots, So a screencast of how to make use of a particular tool. You would be sending them to some websites on how to learn how to reference. You would be maybe sending them even to people like consultations in the writing center and so on. So just thinking about how you would be supporting these students. And we'll then come back and just chat a bit about that. So I'll give you, so let's say 15 minutes for that.
I hate to be sad, seems like we've got everyone back.
Okay, thank you. And welcome back, everybody. And we'll just go around the room and maybe get one person per group, just to let us know what digital literacy skills, or what came to your mind? What do you think you would integrate into your activity? So what digital literacy skills did you think you would integrate into the activity? What would you require your students to do? Anyone from group one? What came to mind?
Hi, Savisa.
Hi.
Yes, in group one, we had a very short discussion, but I think I think the same would apply maybe in some groups. So we, for myself personally, we are a postgrad only department, but some of my colleagues, they have both postgrad and undergrad. And I think the basic kind of digital literacies would be kind of embedded in the courses for the different assessments. But I think at times, because of trying to get through the content and because one has a whole curriculum to go through, that one would not be as creative as would like to be. In most, I mean, in the simple thing as an essay, we wouldn't actually, it would, I mean, you could do that, get the students to achieve the same objectives, but not maybe via other mediums. And they could use different resources. They could use web blogs on Vula to do the same thing, but because of time constraints and everything else, we kind of stick to the mode of the essay, and they probably have to use Vula and do the search and have to use your whatever referencing style that is required. And I think also they would not probably, I mean, we are not as creative as where they can include videos within their essays, because also you'd be thinking from the side of marking, that would probably be great that they're learning those skills. However, would it not be complicated in marking? So I think the basic ones, we probably are doing that, but I think then being intentional about it. And I think the social aspect of it, that it is not a standalone, but the social practice coming in and within whatever discipline is in. So yeah, that's more or less the discussion we had. Thank you.
Thank you. So as you are saying that, so it's really also clear, it's also about the learning outcomes. That's why I had this table, which again brings us back to thinking about our learning outcomes. So definitely, if it's a maybe media studies course, and you really want them to be working with videos and so on, or even other courses have been doing that for students to work together to create a video, but that's definitely should be something that's also related to the learning outcomes. So the students are achieving both the learning outcome of the course as well as acquiring digital literacy skills. And of course, even blogging, that's also a literacy on its own. And so you would be also sort of uh, helping students to think about and work with the blogging genre, more especially if you would want that to be at some point going public. unless you just want to be keeping it within the course and you want them just to reflect. But immediately you want them to make that public, you would also be putting in more effort into helping them understand the genre of working of the blogs. And so that's also a digital literacy skill on its own. Thank you. Any other group? Just one more. Okay. So I also did realize that there are some comments here in the chat, and so I'll be addressing these your question, Alan. So I'll be addressing that in the next slide. And Jad, do you want to just share with us what this is? That call framework, what it looks like, or how it has helped you develop? Yes, yes.
Sure. So I'm trying to use kind of playing around with the community of inquiry framework to try and create this like community of learning and helping between the students. And I'm looking at Chinese language learning. So the outcome that I was looking at was just the pronunciation outcome, and seeing how to integrate technology. And that requires students to send voice notes, which we can have them send through WhatsApp, which was a thought, or Telegram, but we would prefer them to send them to the LMS, so to Hula or to Sakai, and then we could assess them. However, that you kind of have to teach them how to upload onto the system. And for some students, they might struggle, thus WhatsApp or Telegram might work better, just using that type of technology. But I was looking at perhaps the integration of Audacity, which is like a recording studio, which the students could assess their tone pronunciation. But that's quite, I feel that's quite a high-tech tool, and that would require us to try and perhaps create videos to assist them with using a tool such as that. And that also gives, if they even have access to a laptop to do such and analyze such. Yeah, so it's a bit of a struggle because of the diverse group that we have.
Yes, of course, because we've got also to be thinking about keeping our courses low tech as much as possible.
Exactly
yeah, so thinking about other tools and looking at the affordances, if they would really help the students in that activity. And of course, also the issue that you're already thinking about, also just providing them some resources on how to make use of the tool that you suggest that they use. Thank you.
Yeah. No, in our session, my colleagues, so we had Suzanne, the librarian. So we were just talking how I'm trying to link the students to the library's resources, just providing links within the LMS, which hopefully they then can explore the library and the tools that the library can assist with. So yeah, just integrating the library is really, really useful, and hopefully will lead to some benefits.
Of course, they will benefit quite a lot. So just pointing them to some resources. So required to do this. Here are some resources that you can get from the library. Okay. So let's wrap up. Thanks for that, Jared. So yes, as we have already talked about some of these, so you're thinking about so important, useful strategies. So you think of incorporating ways of supporting students with digital skills in your course. And so as we said, you could be creating some screencast or pointing them to existing resources. As you know, there are already quite a lot of other resources that are already available on the South side. And when thinking about introducing technology already, you've got to be also thinking about how much time you would give students to learn how to use the tool itself before really engaging in the activity that they've got to be doing. And then you provide ongoing support. So as you say, you would be pointing them to various places, including the library, including sold resources you could also make use of. And of course, it's also important that also yourself, you feel comfortable with using the tool. so that you could be able to support students as best as you can. And then just the last one is just to talk about what we have got, and that will also link to Alan's comment there. So there is for first year students, so there is the computer literacy self-assessment tool that they've got to complete, and that is managed by the faculty first year experience coordinators. And so I'm sure you can contact them to just get an understanding of where your students' computer and digital literacy levels are at. And so they have completed that, most of them, although we understand that because of some who have missed the orientation, they might have not really done the self-assessment. But the purpose was that they would be doing this, and then after that, the orientation leaders were going to be training these students. So I understand this has happened in the faculties. And then there was also the orientation sites, which were sort of introducing students to learning online, and also had the digital literacy component. And so those sites, I understand, are still open to first year students. So you could also be reminding your students to visit those sites. So quite a lot of resources that have been invested there. And then there's the Learn Online page. When you get into Vola, you can just click on home, and then you will find the Learn Online page, which has got quite a lot of resources. And this is just an example here. This is a screenshot from there. And so there are so many resources that are there for beginners. There's also this resource, digital literacy resources, that have been recommended and are put together. You'll find that in a ICTS site. And then there are also other resources that are on Vola, LinkedIn, Learning, Office, and so on. And there's also just that tool as well that students could use just to gauge their readiness for physically distanced learning. And so that Learn Online page is available right through the year, and any body may make use of it. So it could be students who are at any level, and even for lecturers, you might find some useful resources. So you can just always keep on pointing students to that. So that's as far as we'll go today. Any questions or any practical processes that you'd like us just to talk about? So with these digital literacy resources, these have been pulled together. They are from, let me just show you what's in there. So once you click on that link, you will get these when you click on that link, this is what you will find. Computer literacy stuff. So this is all from the LinkedIn learning site. So we've just, ICTS has just pulled together some of these important ones, which we think would just be great to be used by the beginners. So some computer literacy, digital literacy stuff, digital production and how they could go around that, information literacy, digital communication, and think about cyber security and all the NetKit stuff that we talked about, collaborations, and also think about their own digital identity and well-being. So it's quite a useful pool of resources. So I think that might be a challenge then, Moya, because they don't really take part in the orientation with the first years, because I guess they will be already in different levels. But also within the course, that's why we are sort of also just making people aware of how they could be integrating this in their courses. So you could be just having a short survey just to also gauge students' digital literacies at the beginning of the year. And then you could introduce some activities that would help them, or just pointing them to some resources. So for instance, if you know those are transfer students, they definitely need to be accessing the resources on the Learn Online page, because those are resources about all the UCT systems. They definitely need to know about ICTS, need to know about Vola, about PeopleSoft, and so on. So then once you pick that, there are some students that need that. Yeah. Okay, then. Okay, Jared.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, because it came to my mind that there's quite a lot of, if the learner is perhaps missing a lot of these digital literacies, it's quite a lot of extra learning that the learner has to do. And that does put a lot of pressure on them to try to be catching up almost. And then once they're caught up, they can then, well, they then have to start actually learning the content and the syllabus and the curriculum. So I'm wondering, I'm just thinking, we kind of have, it's almost like we have to balance our courses and the hours it takes to learn the content with also learning these digital technologies, or at least these skills, digital literacies.
Yes, yes. Yeah, so you've got to be thinking about that as you are planning your activity. So what's the new stuff that they've got to be learning here? And so there should be enough time for them to acquire the skills for using the tool, and then as well as engaging in the activity. That's correct.
No, thank you.
Okay, then. Thank you, everyone. I won't take more of your time then, and so we'll call it a day. Thank you.